200,000 pairs of shoes a year in 1936, when almost no one in Europe knows what a sports shoe is, when athletes run in city shoes, and footballers play in work boots with no support, no traction, with nothing designed for performance. A single-family company controls the entire sports footwear market of the continent, with no competition, no rival, with the most solid monopoly the sports industry has ever seen. And then the two men who built it go their separate ways. The result? $27 billion a year for one, $9 billion for the other, $36 billion combined. And Nike, which did not exist, entering through the door they left open to take the crown. How do you split the perfect monopoly in two and have each half build an empire on its own?
What we're going to see today is not a story of brothers who fight. That's what everyone says. If what no one tells is the system, how the most brutal rivalry in the history of sport became the most powerful engine of innovation of the 20th century, and how that same engine cost them the crown when a third party arrived with free hands.
To understand how they come to control an entire continent from a village that appears on almost no map, you have to understand where all of this begins. And it does not begin with money, or investors, or a grand strategic vision. It begins in his mother's laundry room. Herzogenaurach, Bavaria, 1919. Adolf Dassler, Adi to everyone, is 19 years old, just back from the First World War, and has an obsession that any reasonable person would consider a waste of time. Making sports shoes in a country that has just lost a war, where the economy is in collapse, where hyperinflation means the price of bread changes 3 times a day, and where the last priority of any European at that moment is buying footwear specifically designed for running. The timing, objectively, could not have been worse. But Adi is not looking at the present. He is looking at a technical problem that no one else is trying to solve. Elite athletes in 1919 compete in generic footwear, made for walking, with no performance engineering. And Adi, who since childhood has worn out shoes running across the fields of Herzogenaurach, knows exactly what fails in each one of them, where the foot hurts, where traction is lost, where the sole breaks when the ground is soft. He sets up his first workshop in the family laundry room, with second-hand tools, leather recovered from military material, and 0 external funding. No bank, no investor partner, nothing. And what he makes there, by hand, one by one, are not pretty shoes. They are shoes that solve concrete physical problems. Better grip on wet grass, a thinner sole to feel the ground, reinforcement in the highest wear areas depending on the sport. Stop here for a moment, because this technical detail is exactly where the monopoly is built, and most people miss it. Adi does not compete on price. He does not compete on marketing. He competes on performance engineering, when no one else in Europe is even thinking about that concept. What he is building in that laundry room is not a shoe. It is a technical barrier to entry. Every solution he discovers, every material he tests, every modification that works, is accumulated knowledge that a competitor would take years to replicate. This has a name today: proprietary knowledge advantage. In 1919, Adi simply calls it doing things right. In 1924, his brother Rudi, joins him, and the dynamic that is born there is the one that will define everything that follows. Adi is the engineer, introverted, obsessed with the product, capable of spending 12 hours testing variations in a sole stitch without lifting his head. Rudi is the salesman, extroverted, magnetic, capable of convincing an athlete that that shoe is going to change his race with the same ease with which he asks him the price. Together they form something few family businesses achieve, a division of functions so clean that neither needs the other to know what to do, but both need the other for the business to work. The company is called Gebruder Dassler, Dassler Brothers, and in 10 years goes from his mother's laundry room to being the only serious sports footwear supplier in Germany. But the moment that turns the Dassler brothers into a global brand does not come from a business decision. It comes from a bet that in August 1936, in the middle of the Berlin Olympic Games, any financial analyst in the world would have labeled as suicidal. Adolf Hitler has turned the Berlin Games into the ideological showcase of the Third Reich, the live demonstration of Aryan superiority in front of the cameras of 80 countries.
And Adi Dassler, at 40 years old, puts his shoes in a suitcase, crosses Germany by train, and goes to find the athlete most likely to destroy that narrative in front of the entire world. Jesse Owens, Black American sprinter, son of sharecroppers from Alabama.
What Adi does here is not philanthropy, nor is it a political act, for the record.
It is a venture capital bet on personal branding before that concept existed. Let's dive into how Adidas revolutionized Olympic marketing back in the mid-20th century.
Wins wearing your shoes, you have just bought global advertising that has no market price because the sports advertising market does not yet exist. Ichiprukuds wins wearing your shoes, you have just bought global advertising that has no market price.
The cost of giving Owens a pair of shoes is zero compared to what it is worth for 80 countries to see those shoes on the feet of the man who humiliated Hitler in his own house. The real risk is not political, it is technical. If Owens loses, or if the shoe fails, the Dassler name is linked to failure in the biggest possible showcase. Jesse Owens wins 4 gold medals in 4 different events: 100 meters, 200 meters, long jump, and relay, with Adi Dassler's shoes spiked into the Berlin track in front of 4 million live spectators and tens of millions glued to the radio around the world. Overnight, orders to Gebruder Dassler multiply. Athletes from all over Europe want the shoes of the man who defeated Hitler. What had been a solid regional business becomes the continental reference for competition footwear, and Adi knows it before the last sprinter crosses the finish line. What Adi does not know yet, what neither of the two brothers knows at that moment, is that the Second World War will do something no competitor had ever managed. Will put Adi and Rudi in the same bunker, on the same night, with the same bomb falling above. And from that bunker they will come out unable to look each other in the eyes ever again. On April 4th, 1945, the Allies are bombing Herzogenaurach, and the two brothers run to the same air raid shelter with their families. Rudi arrives late, soaking wet, and utters the most expensive sentence of his life, a complaint about those damned bastards, referring to the American bombers. Adi hears it differently, or so Adi says later, because what Rudi says exactly that night, and what Adi understands, no one knows for certain. And that misunderstanding, that sentence in a dark bunker with bombs falling above, is going to split the greatest sports monopoly in Europe in two. Adi interprets that Rudi is talking about them, about the family, about him. Weeks later, when the Allies occupied Germany and the interrogations begin, Adi testifies before the American authorities. Rudi is arrested and taken to an internment camp for months, convinced that it was his own brother who had informed on him. Adi denies it his whole life.
The historical documents are inconclusive. What is conclusive is what happens next. When Rudi leaves the internment camp in 1946, he enters the family factory, takes what he considers his, and crosses to the other side of the Aurach River. Literally. On the other side of the river that divides the town.
A partnership worth a continental monopoly broad, destroyed by a sentence in a bunker that no one can verify. The system that fails here is not the business. It is the absence of a partnership structure that separated the company from the personal relationship. When personal conflict and business conflict share the same room, the personal one always wins.
In 1948, the Dassler brothers cease to exist. Adi registers Adidas, his name, his initials. Rudi registers Ruda, which he later changes to Puma. 2 factories, 2 brands, same town, same river, same history, and 0 possibility of reconciliation. Herzogenaurach splits in 2 in a way that today seems impossible to believe. Adidas workers do not shop in stores whose owners wear Puma shoes. Puma workers do not get their hair cut at the barber shop where the barber wears Adidas shoes. School children look at each other's feet before deciding whether to talk to each other. The townspeople call Herzogenaurach the town of bent necks, because everyone looks down at the ground to identify the other person's side before saying hello. 40 years of sports Cold War in a town of 20,000 inhabitants, where the battlefield was footwear. But what happens at the business level in those years is what no business strategy manual would dare recommend. And yet, it works. The rivalry forces both companies to innovate at a speed neither would have reached alone. Adidas brings a technical improvement. Puma counterattacks with another. Puma signs 1 athlete. Adidas signs 2. Adidas moves into football. Puma moves into athletics. Every move the brother makes is a direct threat that forces the other to respond. And that constant pressure turns both brands into the most technically advanced references in global sports footwear in less than a decade. The first great testing ground arrives at the 1954 Football World Cup. West Germany reaches the final against Hungary, undefeated since 1950, with an 8-3 against Germany in the group stage. And nobody gives a mark for the Germans. But Adi has been working for weeks on something no one has ever seen on a football pitch. Boots with interchangeable studs depending on pitch conditions. The final is played in Bern with heavy rain. The pitch turned to mud. The Hungarians slipping in standard boots. The Germans are wearing Adi's long studs. Germany wins 3-2. The miracle of Bern has a very specific technical explanation that the newspapers of the time do not see, but that every coach in Europe sees perfectly. Orders to Adidas after the World Cup are brutal, and Puma loses ground in football for years. The war intensifies all the way to Mexico '68, where Tommy Smith wins gold in the 200 meters, and on the podium raises his fist with the black glove, the most iconic gesture of the games of the 20th century. On his feet, 1 Puma shoe, the other barefoot. Neither Adi nor Rudi had contracted the symbol, just the shoe. And the symbol took everything. But while the 2 brothers fight over athletes at the Olympic Games, something is changing in the market that neither of them is watching, because they have spent 30 years staring at each other. In 1964, at a university in Oregon, an accounting student named Phil Knight and his athletics coach are sewing shoes in a kitchen waffle iron to test whether a honeycomb-shaped sole gives more traction. What they build is not technically superior to what Adidas already has, but they sell it in a completely different way. They do not sell performance. They sell identity. They do not tell the consumer, "This shoe will make you faster." They tell him, "This shoe defines who you are." It is the exact moment when the sports market stops being a product market and becomes a culture market. And Adidas and Puma, with their engineers and their Olympic athletes, do not see it coming because no one is forcing them to look at it. They are called Nike. They sign Michael Jordan in 1984 for $250,000 a year, a figure that at the time seems absurd, and they build around him the first sports super brand in history.
3 systems, 3 lessons. All 3 affect you directly if you have a partner, a company, or a competitor. Forced rivalry works as an engine of innovation, but only as long as both actors keep staring at each other.
Adidas and Puma innovated more apart than together, precisely because the hatred was real fuel. The problem is that that same fuel blinds you, and while you stare at your rival, the market moves without asking your permission.
The second, a monopoly is not destroyed by external competition. It is destroyed by a misinterpreted conversation between partners.
The Dasslers controlled an entire continent and lost it over a sentence in a bunker that no one can verify. If your partnership has no legal structure that separates the company from the personal relationship, partner agreement, conflict protocols, exit mechanisms, you are not building a business. You are building a bomb with a timer.
The third ran out, and this is the one that hurts the most. Adidas and Puma created the global sports footwear market.
They developed the technology, educated the consumer, proved that performance could be sold. And then Nike arrived, with free hands, with no brother war to feed. And instead of competing on performance, it competed on culture. It took the crown that the Dasslers had built, using a language they never learned to speak. The one who creates the market is not always the one who keeps it. Sometimes the one who arrives later sees more clearly what the pioneer can no longer see, because the pioneer is too busy staring at his brother. How much of the market you are building today are you leaving open, without knowing it, for the one who arrives later with free hands?